Welcome, everyone, to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petrick and Adrian Gonzalez. How's it going, Adrian?
Pretty good. How are you?
All right. I know you got things cooking, but let's take care of the upkeep, and we can update the listeners about our lives, what's going on with us, what's going on in Magic as a whole. So first, we do want to talk about the folks, the ways you can support this show, the people who help bring this show to you every week. First up is Original Magic Art. They are a really neat company. They do all sorts of gaming accessories with art, both from the rest of the world and Magic's history itself. They just, by the time this gets up for non-patrons, They will have wrapped on a very successful Kickstarter for their Relics of Wizardry product line. They're these cool little metal tokens. But if you have an interest in getting some tokens, playmats, dice bags, art prints, all sorts of fine stuff, and you go over there, you can use the code Commontary, spelled as it is in our name, all capitals, and you're going to save 5% on your order. We also get a little bit of a kickback, so you're helping keep the lights on here at the podcast. You're also getting a nice little discount on your order, and everyone kind of wins. Josh is a really great guy. Totally back his product. Go out there. Go buy. What do you got for us, Adrian?
Well, we have updated our Patreon for just $1 an episode. You can hear the full show, including the pre and post shows, as well as getting access to our patron exclusive Discord, which is actually a lot better than we thought it would be. So get in there. Yeah. And as the sirens go off in the distance.
Yeah, I live near a hospital. It's kind of unavoidable. But yeah, we just updated the Patreon, made it a lot simpler, and I do actually like the Discord. We've had some good discussions there. So I think that does it for how this show gets brought to you. I did want to talk about one thing that's happening in the world of Magic as a whole that is completely irrelevant to us. There is a neat little buy a box promo happening on Black Friday. If you buy a box on Black Friday, you get this cool little buy a box pack like they've been doing for regular sets, except these ones feature one slot that is guaranteed to be one of the Ixalan flip cards, except what they've done is the front side is the same. The back side, instead of having the illustration that it normally has a part of the Ixalan map where that location is, because all these flip cards flip into lands. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on these?
That's pretty cool. I will probably not get any.
I probably won't either. I did not have a big need for a box of Ixalan, and I get that this is to drive people into stores for Black Friday, but I think they could have just done this from the get-go, and it probably would have moved a lot of product. Just my immediate take. And you're going to be out of town for a little bit in March. Do you want to tell the folks at home what you're up to?
Yes, I'm going to GP Kyoto, where I will be the legacy member of our team constructed team.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. You'll have to get some pictures while you're there, put them on the Twitter. We'll be able to live vicariously through you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a while away, but it'll be fun.
Oh, yeah. But actually, it's not that far away. It's what, like 4 months?
Yeah, that's not that far away at all, actually. Now that you mention it.
All right. So we've covered what's going on in our actual lives and Magic as a whole. Oh, by the way, I do have some actual Pauper-related news. Did you check out From the Vault Transform?
Yes.
What are you
Delver?
Yeah. What are your takes on the new Delver art? They for those who don't know, From the Vault is a curated set of cards with a special foiling process, and they all have a theme in common. And in this case, the theme was not flip cards, double-faced cards. That's the technical term they use for them. And one of them is Pauper legal. And there is a very fancy Delver of Secrets out there. What are your feelings on the art here?
He's a fancy boy. Nils Hamm is one of my favorite artists in Magic. His art style is not very common. That being said, I do like the new art.
Yeah, I think I'm less of a fan of the front side, but the back side is really cool. I don't care for the flip side of the original Delver, but that's just me.
It's spooky.
Yeah, it's a little darker. But yeah, there's some really good art in this thing. They did new art for Delver of Secrets. They did new art for Huntmaster of the Fells, which got the Magali Villanueva treatment and looks gorgeous. And Garrick Relentless got new art, but neat little thing. For those interested in very fancy foils, there is now going to be another Delver. But let's get into our topic at hand. One of our patrons actually in the Discord, and not to shill too much, but this is a reason if you were thinking about it, suggested to us that we do an episode about Vinestorm. And Adrian, have you ever played this deck?
No.
Have you ever played against this deck?
No. Tell me all about it.
So, as most people who play Pauper know, most of the Storm payloads are banned, and we have, I believe, only 2 Storm cards left that are I've ever seen played in Pauper, period. We've got Reaping the Graves, which is a graveyard recursion spell with Storm, which is pretty neat and pretty powerful. And the other one in here is Sprouting Vines. And for a recap, for those who may not have played Magic as long as either of us, Storm is a mechanic that is on instants and sorceries, and it says when you cast this spell, you may copy it for each spell played before it. So if 3 spells have been played that turn and you play a spell with Storm, you get the copy you cast and then you get 3 additional copies. So it is a very powerful mechanic. And I mean, in modern, what does modern Storm look like at this point? I don't know.
It's blue-red, and they have cool toys like Baral, Chief of Compliance, and they're playing Gifts Ungiven now. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and Legacy has its handful of Storm variants, ranging from ad nauseum tendrils to the good old Tin Fins, a deck that is frankly baffling to stare at. That is actually one of the combo decks I have a soft spot for, but never want to pilot.
You just like it because it's called Tin Fins, Mike. I know what you're up to.
I like it because it's called Tin Fins. I also like it because I found out where that name comes from, and it's another one of those hilarious deep cuts.
It's the C-Lab joke.
It is. It's a bit of a walk, but so Storm is this very, very powerful mechanic. It's considered by R&D one of their biggest mistakes, and this deck is using, I think, one of the least powerful Storm cards in existence, and it's Sprouting Vines. Sprouting Vines is 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand. And this doesn't seem very good at its face. Like, I can't even think of if I'd want this in EDH. It just seems very, very narrow. But someone out there was dedicated enough to figure out a combo. So how this works is you're going to cast a whole bunch of cantrips and build up your Storm count. And you're going to cast Sprouting Vines, getting a whole lot of land into your hand. You're then going to cast Tolarian Winds, which is 1 and a blue for a sorcery. Discard your hand, draw that many cards. You're then going to cross your fingers and pray, and then hopefully play a succession of rituals, spells that add more mana than they cost, and then you're going to Carevex torch your opponent. Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
It like from a purely technical standpoint, it is actually like one of those cool. Like there are a couple this and One Land Spy are like the 2 Pauper decks that are like someone figured this out, and it actually is like kind of cool to see like how mechanically like how all these cards interact with each other. But I think the problem with them is they don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah. So let's kind of get a little bit more into this deck list. So for Brainstorm and for Preordain, you got to get the filtering. Most combo decks, regardless of format, need a good chunk of filtering to make sure that they can find the pieces that'll actually make the combo work. I might personally prefer Ponder to Preordain here, but
well, what do you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, when it comes to the Preordain versus Ponder argument, if I need to draw a specific card, I'm always going to side with Ponder over Preordain.
Sure, it's a more combo oriented card, I would say too.
Yeah. Then we've got Manamorphose, which is 1 and a hybrid green-red. Add 2 mana of any color to your mana pool, draw a card. So this both serves double duty of fixing your mana and cycling itself for another card. So it's mana neutral, but you get to see one more card, and it also lets you kind of get a little funky with your land base. Then we got Rite of Flame, which is a red for a sorcery. Add red to your mana pool plus an additional red for each copy of Rite of Flame in the graveyard. So if you manage to snap off all 4 of these in a turn, it's going to be what? 2, 5, 9, 10 total mana.
Yeah.
I get. Oh, actually, wait. It's gonna be. You're gonna be up 7 though, because you're spending. Oh, sorry, up 6 because you're spending 4 for the rights. Then we've got 4 copies of Accumulated Knowledge, 1 in a blue. Draw a card, and then draw a card for each copy of Accumulated Knowledge in your graveyard. Tolarian Winds is going to pitch your hand, so I can see that being useful here as well with Rite of Flame, just being able to get more cards for your investment. And then the weird one. So we've got Gush, format staple, 4 in a blue, draw 2 cards or bounce 2 islands. This also serves double duty with Tolarian Winds because it gets 4 cards into your hand. So those 4 cards, when you pitch everything to Tolarian Winds, are going to represent 4 more chances to draw into the combo. But the neat one here is Inner Fire, which, are you familiar with this card at all, Adrian?
No, but I have a feeling you're about to tell me.
So it's 3 and a red for a sorcery. Add 1 red mana for each card in your hand. So this card is usually quite bad, but if you have a turn where your hand size is something silly like 15, it's going to very realistically add a whole ton of mana to your mana pool. Now, as we mentioned, the kill condition on this is Carevex Torch. There's also 2 copies of Giga Drowse, which lets you tap down your opponent's lands to hopefully mitigate interaction. Although with Carevex Torch, you also have the fact that it is hard to counter. Giga Drowse is more to stop them from countering the early parts of the combo. Then we have 4 copies of Lotus Petal, which is a land that isn't really, but you only get to use it once. And 2 copies of Conjurer's Bauble, which is 1 generic for an artifact. You tap and sack it to take a card from your graveyard, put it on the bottom of your library, and then draw a card. So this kind of lets you get out of oopsie situations where Carevex Torch has wound up in the graveyard for whatever reason.
Whoops a hoochie.
Okay, so this deck is a combo deck that requires very specific things to go right. For example, I have a feeling that missing a land drop in this may spell death. I'll also note that if we look down at the lands, there are no green sources in this deck. So if you don't have a Lotus Petal or Manamorphose, you cannot cast Sprouting Vines. So what's kind of your gut reaction here to this deck? Like, looking at this list, and I know you've known about the deck, but I don't think you've probably stared at the list this long. What's the first reactions in your mind?
See what I said with that Freed combo. It's just another pop deck that gets to abuse the fact that we have all these really cool mana accelerants, but cannot take advantage of the fact that we don't have a very good Storm card. Obviously, Carevex Torch is way worse than Grape Shot. So the like the accelerants are all there. The payoff just really isn't. And like I said, mechanically, I think the deck is actually really cool just because someone put it together. It's kind of a unique win condition. But I think you said before the show, you had to get a result from like 2 years ago. Like it's really just not that viable, especially like with the way, like 2 years ago, the format was very, very different.
Yeah. And I think one of the big things that it comes down to when you compare this to something like Storm in another format, instead, where when you look at the other Storm decks, at the end, right before you cast your win condition, you only need enough mana to cast that. And even if you're using like Tendrils of Agony and Legacy, you only need 4 mana at the end of this whole equation. With Carevex Torch as your kill condition, assuming your opponent hasn't damaged themselves somehow, you do need like 20 odd mana. And that is a significantly steeper ask than, 4. Or in Modern, you've got Baral and you've got Grape Shot. Like that is 1 mana. Like you do not need, you basically need to just break even on your combo turn. It's not exactly, as tall of an ask. This deck is, in my mind, fairly fragile. Like it does things that help it out in the form of Giga Drowsing, so your opponent can't counter one of your first rituals or anything like that, or they can't counter the Tolarian Winds. And I feel like once you get to the point where you're casting a Giga Drowse, you're fairly likely, as long as that big draw off Tolarian Winds comes through correctly, you have a pretty good shot of winning the game from that point. It's just the whole journey to get to that point that kind of sketches me out a little bit personally.
Yeah.
And then I'm also like imagining there is a situation. There's 12 basics in this deck. I can definitely see a situation where like it gets a little dodgy on actually finding, like I can imagine you failing to find off of several of your copies of Sprouting Vines. And having not picked up this deck myself, outside of like goldfishing it a couple times, it significantly worries me that you could find yourself in a situation where you've managed to stay alive long enough and you've drawn enough of your lands where that Sprouting Vines just might not get you quite high enough. Obviously, there's a lot of numbers to run on this for someone to say with any sort of empirical data what your odds are, but I can just see a lot of situations where things go wrong and it's fairly hard to recover from those. So that's what kind of sketches me out. And I see like there's the Conjurer's Bauble in there, which does give you sort of that option to sort of respin,
and there's also like you've Giga Drowse to sort of help you combo off. Yeah, I think the mana base is really the sketchiest part. I guess you do have like Lotus Petals and Rite of Flames and stuff, but in a format that's predominantly basics, it's kind of a tough sell sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, and I do think I don't know. It just, I can see like certain like minor edges here. Like we've got Ash Barrens in this. Like you can technically, if you don't have all your basics in your hand, cycle the Ash Barrens to just make it more likely that Tolarian Winds is going to hit what you need to win. Just like, thinning a little bit. But I mean, I hate to be this guy. I hate to be, Captain Reality here, but there's a reason I really had to dig for a list for this. And the one that we're actually using is a user submitted deck on Goldfish. Like I could not find a moderately recent version of this that, 5-0 to League or got in the top 32 of a challenge. So this is kind of a deep dive. Now the sideboard, man, do we even want to cover this sideboard? Like it just kind of...
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we've got a forest, which already is kind of funky. 2 copies of Electrickery, 2 copies Pyroblast, 1 Repeal, 2 Spell Pierce, a Flaring Pain, just in case they side in Cop Red against you, because that's going to be a bad time. 4 copies of Moment's Peace to help, in the aggro matchups, and 2 copies of Keep Watch, which is 2 and a blue instant, draw a card for each attacking creature. So, actually, I kind of want to talk about Keep Watch. I'm just looking at this. Tolarian Winds is an instant. Oh, Karavek's Torch is a sorcery. I was going to say, is there a way that this deck actually goes off at instant speed? But
no, yeah. Unfortunately, Blue Sun Zenith, this ain't.
Yeah. And
I mean, I guess if you put Capsize in here, but you just don't have the mana base really to do Capsize, I don't think.
Yeah, and you can't really filter all that red mana into blue either. Like,
yeah,
Capsize does have double blue in its cost. So Keep Watch is interesting because if your opponent does swing in with a decent non-lethal chunk of creatures, you could Keep Watch and like draw a bunch of cards if you're primed to combo off the next turn. And I'm looking at this, and I mean, I can imagine a situation where if your opponent swings in, you Keep Watch, you don't even need to use Sprouting Vines when they swing it in, just because you've drawn enough to be statistically likely for that Tolarian Winds to get you where you need to be, especially because you're not needing, like, I could see those 2 Giga Drows becoming, I guess Giga Drows hits creatures too. I'm trying to figure out like how you sideboard with this, because much like we talked about in our last episode, like, and I think even more so for this deck, is the fear of over sideboarding with this has to be very real. Like, this is a combo deck that's playing on, this isn't, this isn't Ant in, or not Ant, the Epic Storm in Legacy. This is like, you're not tutoring for your win condition. You're wheeling yourself and really hoping that you either see another wheel that you can cast or you hit what you need to win. And I can get intellectually the appeal of that, like, this kind of on the edge deck, but the thing I can think about comparing this to, honestly, is something like High Tide and Legacy. And for people who haven't seen High Tide and Legacy, it does not interact pretty much at all. It's just going, I'm going to wait until the turn before I die, and then I'm going to try and combo out. And that's kind of what Vinestorm, at least to me, that's how it's reading. It's kind of one of these situations where you're waiting to the very last possible moment and then trying to combo out. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah. Unfortunately, can't go instant speed, but I mean, the turn you win is going to be the turn you win with this deck, which is cool. Like, that's what I think makes it like a good combo deck. But yeah, I don't know if it has the tools to deal with how aggressive the metagame has gotten now.
I think that's a good segue into our actual discussion today. And I've titled this section with one of everyone's favorite quotes out of Jurassic Park. Your scientists were too preoccupied with whether they didn't stop to think if they should. And this is going to be us kind of talking about this genre of decks that exists within Pauper. And it's specifically combo lists that have this very specific combo that they go off with, but are so devoted to that and have needed to devote so many resources to making this combo work for them that they're not actively advancing their game plan until really the turn where it kind of all clicks together. And you listed down here Freed from the Real, and I think that's a great example of a deck where you're doing pretty much nothing but setup until the turn where you actually go off.
Yeah.
And do you want to walk us through some of the other these sort of fragile combo decks that, when they win, they win.
I don't really know this top one, Spiteful Leeches. Like I have a vague understanding of how that might work.
Okay, that one is like a little lower than the rest of them. Let's go with another one that you can explain.
Helix combo is one with like Banishing Knack and Retraction Helix and Foundry Golem, and you basically make infinite golems with it. And I actually think that list does look pretty sweet, even if it's not super great. We have One Land Spy, which is the one where you mill yourself totally, and then you try and use cards out of your graveyard. And actually, that deck I don't think wins when it goes off. That deck can sometimes just lose to itself. It's kind of funny. I think the card is called Burning Soul Eater. It's the mono red deck.
Immolating Soul Eater, yeah.
Immolating Soul Eater.
Yeah, there's that version of it. So Immolating Soul Eater is 2 generic for a 1/1 that you can pay a Phyrexian red mana. So most of the time 2 life to pump it +1/+0. And I'm assuming you're referring to the version of this that is the Ultra Glass Cannon one that runs like all the free mana and hopes to just turn to the opponent, right?
Yeah, correct. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go for it.
Yeah, that deck. The one deck I think that is on here that is good is the Tireless Tribe deck. If you don't interact with that deck, it can kill you on like turn 3, and chances are they actually do have interaction. Like it's actually I think that's actually a fairly good deck. Their creatures are hard to kill outside of black removal. They generally have an answer when when they go off. They don't really need to do a whole lot in order to win. They just really need to draw like 1 or 2 cards. So I actually do like the Tireless Tribe combo deck. I think that it has the appearance of fragility, and it's definitely like an all-in deck. And if you were to somehow stop it when in the middle of them going off, I think they would definitely lose afterwards. But I actually do like that deck quite a bit. And then there's the free from the real. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the one that we forgot to put on here is the Arcane Splice deck, which we've covered before on the show.
Oh, you mean Petal Festival?
It's the Arcane Splice deck. I'm not calling it Petal Festival. I flat out.
Petal Festival.
I'm going to refuse on principle on that one. But like all of these decks, though, and I think it's good to point out that Tireless Tribe has been seeing success, and in a related vein, there's also been the string of on and off successes with Presence of Gone, Midnight Guard. So there are combo decks that kind of fall into this sort of janky, weird section of combo that are still performing well, but by and large, most of these decks, like I can completely forgive you for not knowing how the Spiteful Leeches combo works. Like, it is not good, period. Like,
I feel like you've said it before, but why don't you explain it again?
I think I talked about it last episode. So basically what you do is there's this card, Spiteful Leeches. Or Cloak of Leeches. That's what it is. It's a aura that lets you regenerate the enchanted creature for 0 mana. And you slap this on your opponent's creature. And then what you do is you use Spiteful Shadows and Guilty Conscience. Spiteful Shadows is whenever this creature's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to its controller. And then Guilty Conscience is whenever... Guilty Conscience is whenever this creature deals damage to a player, it deals that much damage to itself. And then you just ping the creature, put infinite regeneration shields on it, and it just loops and pings its controller to death. But as you'll note, that's 4 cards that are required to go off with that thing, assuming your opponent does not have interaction. Like, that is a sizably bigger ask than some of these other decks. And also none of those, I should note, have any sort of redundancy. Like, even looking at this, even looking at the Vinestorm list, like, I can see here that there is some sort of weird out that doesn't involve hitting all the combo pieces. It just, like, getting like an AK for 2 or 3 and then gushing a couple times, that could be enough to go off. But with Spiteful Leeches, it very much is, there's these three cards you got to assemble in a very specific way. And if you do that and your opponent can't interact with you, you might be able to win this. So that's definitely, you know, bottom of the barrel. But so one of the things, and I think you mentioned this, you talked about Tireless Tribe interacting. What in particular are you talking about with their interaction, and how are the other decks sort of missing that component?
They just don't really interact. We were talking about the decks we just went over, Spiteful Leeches.
Not even Spiteful Leeches, just this list of combo decks that we have. Like,
oh, sorry, yeah, they generally don't have any removal. They generally don't have any way of dealing with their opponent's stuff. They generally don't have any counter spells to protect themselves. You know, Tireless Tribe is the obvious exception to the rule, and I think that's what makes it so good, is that, you know, they can always just dump cards to counter your cards, or like Circular Logic is super good in that. Is that Circular Logic? Yeah, I think so. Super good in that deck. So I think that's the one that stands above, just because it has the interaction. Like one time, I dazed a land grant for one land spy, and how do you beat daze if they daze your land grant? Like, it's impossible. You just sit there and you draw a bunch of useless cards.
I was going to say, I think they're out at that point is having another land grant in hand. Like,
yeah, they didn't. So I think that's really the big thing, is just not being very interactive, and also not really having a backup plan. Tireless Tribe will just beat you down with the 1/1s, you know? So, I mean, conceivably it could, if you were a control deck and you stall out.
Well, I mean, the other more successful one that we talked about was the list that was kind of championed by Methodical for a while, and the challenges with the Presence of Gone Midnight Guard combo, where that deck could just be like a green-white mid-range deck, and it kind of had that as a backup plan. And I think one of the issues here is, you know, you're looking at these very all-in combos that don't leave a lot of room for these interactive spells, and compare this to, you know, not to return to previously tread ground, but, you know, the Storm decks in Legacy all have access to blue and all have access to Force of Will. They also get the luxury of being able to combo quickly enough where they can run things like, Cabal Therapy. So you've got the fact that in other formats, these dedicated combo decks aren't any less dedicated. They just have the option to run these powerful answers that just simply aren't available in Pauper. Like in Pauper, I think the best you do really for these, and I know it's in the Tireless Tribe lists, is something like Dispel to interact with your opponent at instant speed if they're trying to interact with you.
Yeah, definitely. And also, the Circular Logic is really good too.
Yeah.
Because they just discard it and they pump their things, so it's really strong. 2 birds, 1 stone,
all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just kind of highlights sort of the core recurring weakness of these, and why, like, I would forgive any one of our listeners for not knowing about like the Immolating Soul Eater all in turn 2 deck, because that was one that I had forgotten about until you put it on the list, and it's a deep cut. Like, all of these are, for the most part, very, very deep cuts, and some of them have seen limited success. Either, I think the Arcane Splice deck showed up and did decently at, what was it, Rags to Riches up in Seattle, but most of these are kind of, you know, the fringe of the fringe, and I think a large part of that, and something I want to talk about, is comparing them to, and I know you have your objections to this, comparing them to the fact that Burn and Stompy might function better as combo decks than this does.
And the reason I don't agree with that is because they are not combo decks. But go on.
Yeah. So what I'm talking about here is, there are when you're playing a combo deck, there's, you know, these 2 sets, if you will, of hands when you take your opening 7. There are the set of hands that, or I guess 3. There's the set of hands that will win uninterrupted. There's a set of hands that could win uninterrupted, and there's a set of hands that won't win uninterrupted. And the won't win is, you know, you're no landers, you're all landers, you're all payoffs, no setup, that sort of stuff. Then there's the might win, where you have most of what you need, but you're going to have to dig for the last couple pieces. And then with combo decks, obviously the best is I just have it on turn one. And that's, you know, with Storm decks and Legacy, at least, you can definitely turn one someone. Like, that is a distinct possibility. And with those three sets, you know, I think if you look at through the same lens at something like Burn or Stompy and say, you know, I've got my keepables, I've got my suspect hands, and then I've got my unkeepables, I would be willing to bet if you know, ran a simulator that spat out every single hand and you had an expert with each of these decks go through and go keepable, maybe not keepable. I have a feeling that the number of combinations of opening hands for something like Burn that will get you there on, let's say, turn 4 are probably relatively higher than some of these combo decks. And I think that's what I'm getting at, is not that they are combo decks, but if you view them through the lens of a combo deck where it's, I need X, Y, and Z for this hand to work, I think that Burn and Stompy are just more efficient at something like that.
And I just find that definition to be very loose. Certainly you can call Affinity maybe a combo deck in Pauper because you have the Atog Fling combo. But I'm not trying to just put decks in boxes here or anything. I understand that, you know, nothing's ever really just one thing or another, but I feel like people have a propensity to call synergistic decks combo decks. And I don't think that that's right.
Yeah. And I totally get where you're coming from. And I guess
also I am the thought police.
I guess with what you said, would it be easier for us to come to a commonality here if I said the synergy of those two synergistic decks that we talked about is more likely to assemble into a turn 4 or so win uninterrupted than these combo decks are? Just sort of reframe that.
I think so, yes. Because Bolt Fire Blast is a lot of damage.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here is, you know, the number of hands for those two decks where it's just like, yeah, no, this works. Like, I'll get there with this if they don't do anything meaningful, I think is just much higher. And so then you have this issue of when one of these combo decks gets matched up against one of these synergistic decks, those synergistic decks are still very sort of one track as to what they're trying to do. But the thing is, they're not trying to assemble X, Y, Z and ABC in that order. They're just trying to assemble, I need either X, Y, or Z and either A, B, or C in any combination of those, and I'll probably get there. Like, Burn doesn't care super much in that matchup if it's killing you off a lightning bolt or it's killing you off a needle drop. It just wants to make sure it deals 20 to you as quickly as possible. And I think that's really the crux of, you know, these very aggressive synergistic decks exist in the format. And when it comes to playing the non-interactive linear game plan, they're just a little bit better at that than these specific combo decks.
Sure. And I think that says more about the format and it's sort of, I think it says more about combo decks in the format than it does about aggro decks in the format, which is basically what we're basically saying. Aggro decks are like combo decks and that they kill you really fast. So I don't know.
I mean, I guess I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on like the place combo has sort of found itself in this format. And I think this is going to verge back into a topic we've already covered, which is banned cards and Pauper. But
yeah, it's just because we don't have a lot of stack interaction in the format. So I guess I guess really I should just widen my idea of what a combo deck is. So like Storm is sort of the quintessential combo deck, but like Flash Hulk is a combo deck, kind of, right? Like you flash in Protean Hulk, and then you get a bunch of other cards. So I guess combo is actually a lot more looser than maybe I'm giving it credit for here.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I think like in the traditional sense of like a combo deck where you assemble a combination of cards that do something to win you the game. I think
right, and I guess I just don't like saying, well, I did damage to you, so it's a combo. I don't know, but so I think that combo is very underrepresented in our format right now because we lack a lot of the good payoffs. The Drake deck was the best combo deck we'd had in ages, and before that it was the Familiars deck, and before that it was the Fissure Post deck. So when I think of a combo deck, I guess I'm thinking of a deck that's going to beat you in one turn using a combination of cards. And that kind of deck is not very good in Pauper.
Yeah. And I mean, a good chunk of that is just the fact that, most of the good combo payloads are just banned because they are a little bit too good. But,
yes,
I don't think it's at all helped by the fact that as of late, the format has been getting more and more aggressive. Like, most decent hands out of Stompy are going to be, between a turn 3 and a turn 5 kill. And if your combo deck is saying, all right, I can combo on turn 4, like that's the earliest I can do it. It's like, yeah, even if you side in your interaction, if you don't see that, you're kind of boned here. Like you're not going to race Stompy. And I think, when I got back into Magic, I definitely heard someone talking about mill. And this is going somewhere related. And they were talking about the fact that if you're playing with a mill game plan, until you have milled your opponent's last card, you have functionally not dealt any tangible damage to them. You've just, as long as they still haven't lost, you might as well have done nothing to them at that point. Like, obviously you're progressing your game plan, but it's not like you're, how do I put this? It's just sort of, as long as they're still attacking on a different axis as you're not really doing anything to prevent that. Like, 2 creature-based, combat-based decks are obviously going to interact with one another along the way. And this sort of very uninteractive game plan, like, sure, when it wins in a single turn. It just kind of does its thing, goes for it, and if it works, at the end, your opponent's just gone. Like, you have finished the game. But up until that point, like, you do interact with your opponent a little bit with these decks, but you're not interacting in a way that's always going to be slowing them down perhaps as much as you'd like. And sure, answers like Moment's Peace are quite good, but I think for me that's the one main failing I can see of these sort of the combo decks that are still legal, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And we kind of touched on this on our last episode, and I don't want to retread too much familiar territory, but we did talk about the whole concept of like, you want to be doing something that actually interacts with the game a lot of the time.
Yeah, for combo decks, that tends to be a lot of cantripping.
Yeah, it's cantripping, and then, occasionally like interacting with your opponent when they're about to kill you. Your fogs, and again, part of why I think some of these decks suffer is the lack of good fixing as well, because the cost of playing something like Cabal Therapy, for example, in Legacy Storm it's less of an opportunity cost than going, all right, so Vinestorm is a red-blue deck primarily, and I'm going to splash black for Duress. Like, that is silly, for lack of a better way to put that. Like, I think that, again, certain types of decks do not fare well with Pauper's mana base, and there's a very good reason that Stompy, a mono green deck, is one of the top decks in the format, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just, consistency. So we've got these limiting factors placed on all these decks, and, the issue of doing nothing until your combo falls into place. I guess one of the things I want to also touch on is, do you have any sort of ideas of, outside of just like, obviously, like, let's say they just print redundant pieces for a combo deck, like what other things would sort of help combo flourish a little bit more in Pauper? Because there aren't really that many combo decks. Like, it's Elves, Tireless Tribe, and
I forgot about Elves. It's tough because it's not like there aren't enough hate cards for it to do well. It's not like there aren't enough defensive cards. I really think it comes down to the lack of like payloads. Like, look at this deck we just covered, and look at how every single card is like, I'm generating mana, or I'm drawing cards, or I'm trying to cast a spell that wins me the game. And that's fine in a vacuum, but there's just no defenses. We don't have cards like Defense Grid. We don't have cards like, and I'm thinking like I'm thinking about non-interactive decks in other formats. We don't have Cabal Therapy or Thoughtseize or anything that actually helps protect you when you're trying to kill your opponent.
Also, notably, outside of One Land Spy, most of these decks don't have the option to just go off turn one. And, like,
that's fine. In Modern, the decks don't go off that early. And, like, Blue-Red Storm certainly doesn't have access to the tools I just mentioned. But I think it's just helped by the fact that the deck's a little faster, a little bit more resilient. I think these decks are very fragile.
Yeah, it's just, it's the relatively down-tuned power level of how these combos are working. It's, more pieces or more copies of the same pieces are needed. Whereas like the Storm deck in Modern is just kind of going, all right, I'm going to play these cost reducers. I'm going to, cast Gifts Ungiven. There is no good way for you to split this pile. You are going to give me my win condition here. And if you have a counter, you might be able to stop what I'm doing. So I think in part it's just the fact that the questions posed by these combo decks are kind of sometimes just, okay, I have the counter spell. Well,
yeah, they're very answerable.
Yeah, and I think, talking about that, Storm is definitely one of those things where how do you stop Storm? Because each one's a different copy. Like, the answers I can come up with are Stifling the Storm trigger, Mindbreak Trap, or no, not Mindbreak Trap. Is that the one I'm thinking of? The
Mindbreak Trap exiles all the spells on the stack. You're probably thinking of Fluster Storm.
Well, Mindbreak Trap works as well, because that's the one where if they've cast 3 or more, it's free.
Right.
Force a will on a part that's part of the setup phase of the combo. Like, I think that the fact that the answers required are sometimes sideboard cards in other formats, whereas, one of the top decks in this format is just running around packing a full playset of counter spells. So that's a bit of a problem for you. Oh, and by the way, they're going to side into more counter spells because they don't need the creature removal that they put in the first time around. Like, there's definitely this element where you're setting yourself in a position where there's main deck hate for what you're trying to do, just sort of incidentally in these decks. And, that's not a good position to be in. Adrian, if I told you could play a match against your opponent knowing what their deck was and pre-sideboarded, would you?
Probably yes. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now at Is It Delver, and I'm seeing a Dispel, 3 copies of Counterspell, and then in the sideboard I'm seeing Hydroblast 3 times, Pyroblast 3 times. It seems bad. It seems very bad for this other deck.
Yeah, dude. I mean, how do they? Yeah, those decks just can't beat counter spells.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day is the aggro decks. Instead of it being in this position where combo has a good, like a really, really solid sort of over one of the big archetypes, your aggro, combo, mid range, all that sort of stuff. Instead of it having one of those that it preys on really well, it kind of doesn't. Like a lot of these combo decks, don't really have a prey, but they do certainly have predators in the form of ever-present blue decks. So it's always going to kind of be an uphill battle until there's either a more efficient combo, either with less pieces or more redundancy. If we're looking at something, obviously, I don't think they're ever printing a tutor spell at common. I think that ship has sailed long ago. It's just the combo decks that we've seen be successful: Tribe, Elves, and Gond combo. 2 of those have a backup plan. One of them gets to run blue in a way where they can actually run counter spells. I think that's those are the bars you got to pass for a combo deck in Pauper. Is just, do I have a backup plan, or can I play blue? Because that way I can at least protect the combo and interact in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
So I guess do you have anything more you'd sort of like to discuss here about combo decks within Pauper? Maybe some suggestions, anything like that?
If you want to play a combo deck, I guess play Burn.
Wow, that wasn't salty in the least, Adrian.
No, if you want to play a real combo deck, I think Tireless Tribe is fine. If you want to play a half C combo deck, I think Affinity is pretty good. So I just think that, and I do like the other combo decks we have mentioned as like thought exercises. I think they are cool. I think it's cool that someone developed those. But I don't think that they are very good maybe you could 5-0 a league with one. I don't think they're a challenge deck, certainly. But they're fun. Like, if you like doing stuff like this, like, we have a bunch of wacky combo. I think we have more wacky combo decks in Pauper than in other formats. Not Vintage. Vintage has more wacky combos. Vintage is basically, I can play whatever I want to win because I'm playing Moxes. So,
well, I was going to say, I think Legacy might give us a run for our money in terms of like weird combo decks, because we've got like Legacy has Oops All Spells, Pauper has One Land Spy. Those two do fairly similar things, right?
Yeah, I would actually agree with you. Yeah, they do. They certainly do. That's funny.
But yeah, like outside of Legacy, and Legacy is a format where, you can just play really good staples in it. And like at High Tide, it would probably not be half as good in Legacy if it didn't have Force of Will. So I don't know. I think those are all good and valid points. It's, it's an uphill battle. Play it if you like it. Like, obviously, we try to create a positive space with this podcast. We're not here to yuck your yum. It's just,
Mike, always with the yucking of the yum.
I'm just trying to say there, if you're looking towards the perhaps spikier side of the format, I cannot in all honesty recommend a lot of these combo decks. I will recommend Elves to you. I hate playing against it, but Elves is a pretty solid combo deck.
It's pretty good. I agree. That's good.
All right. Do you have anything else tonight, or would you like to take us out of this show, Adrian?
I'll take us out. Thanks for joining us today. This podcast is brought to the support of our patrons. Consider supporting us if you like the show. Check below this video or the description of this podcast for more details on where to find us. We would like to remind you that if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or an idea for a topic, absolutely feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com, or become a patron, hang out in the Discord. Special thanks to Pat's Games and L. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.